This is NAEMSE chapter on lesson plans, part 2, and we'll be picking up at the heading titled Sources of Lesson Plans. Lesson plan templates are available from a variety of sources, ranging from the course instructor to outside agencies to textbook publishers. Some common sources of lesson plans include the following. 1. State EMS offices. State agencies may develop lesson plans for EMS courses in their state. 2. Primary or senior instructors. Instructors who have been teaching a course for some time most likely will have modified existing lesson plans or developed their own. These instructors may be adept at writing lesson plans, thus serving as a lesson plan development mentor for new instructors. However, instructor-modified lesson plans should be tailored to a particular cohort's learning needs and should complement the instructor's preferences in teaching. Therefore, each instructor should carefully review and modify a lesson plan before it is used. 3. Publishers. Lesson plans for nationally recognized courses are frequently obtained from publishers. Publishers of textbooks often provide not only lesson plans, but also complete instructional support packages to supplement their texts. One must remember that these lesson plans and accompanying materials are designed for a wide audience and may be biased toward a particular product or approach. They often need modification and must frequently be tailored if they are to address local system issues. Instructors should avoid relying totally on these instructional packages. They must be sure to invest sufficient time in their own lesson preparation and delivery. Often, packaged lesson plans are prepared to meet minimal objectives. They may not incorporate higher learning objectives or include activities designed to synthesize information and encourage problem solving and critical thinking. The instructor should not assume that a packaged lesson plan addresses all of the educational standards at the appropriate level. Instructors should conduct an analysis to determine whether the lesson includes the competencies, behaviors, judgments essential to the standard. Instructors should consider customizing objectives by cross-referencing with required standards and also list the standard number with the relevant objective. This may inform earlier lessons or previous knowledge of a group of students to reinforce and build on earlier learning at each step of the program. Number 4, national organizations. Several national organizations and groups produce specialty courses that cover a specific topic in detail. Examples of these, quote, alphabet soup or, quote, boutique courses include ACLS, Pediatric Advanced Life Support, or PALS, and International Trauma Life Support, or ITLS. Lesson plans provided for these courses vary in complexity. However, most are very basic and are designed to closely follow an accompanying video or PowerPoint presentation. Lessons are planned around a specific time frame and assessment process. Because of the administrative control associated with many of the courses, instructor variation through tailoring of lesson plans is limited. Instructors must follow the lesson plans and schedule closely because they are often one of the cadre of instructors who have been assembled to teach such a course. Number 5, institutions and agencies. Institutions and agencies such as fire departments and EMS services may produce their own lesson plans to ensure consistency and uniformity in instruction. This is usually the case with in-house and procedural training courses, especially when instruction is scheduled to occur at various geographically separated locations. A trainer or central office staff may prepare lesson plans for distribution to instructors at various locations. Teaching tip. An instructor who is selecting lesson plans must make sure that the source is appropriate for the students. For example, a lesson plan on the cardiovascular system at the paramedic level would not be appropriate for use in a CPR course for lay people. Note that some commercial lesson plans have costs or restrictions associated with them. Proper permission to use a lesson plan must be obtained. New heading, the needs assessment. The needs assessment encompasses the intended audience, previous knowledge, student learning preferences, academic backgrounds, barriers that may impede the learning process, and environment. This assessment should be identified prior to development of a lesson plan and in conjunction with the objectives of the lesson plan. Tools to obtain this information can be purchased from vendors or asset tests of local community colleges, or may be self-constructed. Pre-entrance applications or surveys sent out to registrants with relevant questions related to the needs of the audience are assessment tools that provide information the educator will need in order to begin construction of the lesson plan. As an example, the EMT educator constructing the lesson plan will need to know the reading level of the students in an upcoming class. Understanding the reading level of the class as well as individual students will help guide how the instructor addresses reading assignments in the textbooks and related handouts. A session schedule may need to be adapted to allow more classroom time to be devoted to explanation or assessment of reading assignments to promote motivation to read the materials and ensure student understanding. Teaching tip box. Class time is precious. Consider assigning students to read the appropriate text chapter before class time and use class time more strategically to apply learned concepts. The instructor can spend time clarifying any complex content and then applying the content to patient situations. New heading, parts of the lesson plan. As has been stated, lesson plans can come from numerous sources and may be written in a variety of formats. The adjunct or lab instructor may have little control over how a lesson plan is constructed. However, most standard lesson plans consist of the following. 1. Audience description. Needs assessment should be completed first. 2. Lesson goals or goal. 3. Cognitive objectives. 4. Psychomotor objectives. 5. Affective objectives. 6. Recommended list of equipment and supplies. 7. Recommended schedule to include breaks. 8. Suggested motivational activity or anticipatory set. 9. Declarative content, local, state, national. 10. Student independent and collaborative activities, guided practice. 11. Formative assessments. 12. Next assignment or lesson. 13. References. 14. Comment section. The format of lesson plans varies greatly according to the source. The lesson plan format may be revised depending on the purpose of the session. Variance may occur if the educator is teaching an EMT, paramedic, or continuing education session. As an example, a continuing education session may incorporate new research based on previous knowledge. That may result in a change in current local practice. However, as a rule, most lesson plans include these listed parts in some form. If the selected lesson plan does not comprise all of these parts, missing sections should be added. If the instructor is inexperienced with curriculum development, the instructor should seek help in preparing the more complicated parts of the lesson plan. A list of the specific details the students will learn on a particular topic can be maintained separately in a document of declarative information similar to an outline format. New subheading, front end. The first few parts of the lesson plan comprise what can be called the quote front end, which contains administrative details and information. This section should contain a title for the lesson or some other scheme by which the lesson can be identified and sequenced. Specific parts of the front end are as follows. New subheading, audience description. The audience description is just what their name implies, or what the name implies. It is a statement describing who is the intended audience for the lesson. In a certification course, this description may be the same for all lesson plans. An example would be, quote, entry-level EMT students. For a more advanced course, the description might be, quote, senior paramedics with command responsibility. Teaching tip box. Demographics of student population include the student's age, educational background, years of experience working in a healthcare profession, the ethnic background. This information is helpful in knowing a particular group's previous knowledge of a topic and therefore the extent of coverage needed in a class. In addition, demographics are useful when creating squads or teams. This information can be used to ensure a variety of backgrounds is represented in each group. New subheading, lesson goal. Lead instructors or program directors typically develop an instructional goal for the entire course as well as a goal or goals for each particular lesson. For example, quote, at the conclusion of this lesson, the student will be able to identify and describe the functions of the endocrine system. The lesson goal identifies the desired outcome of the session or program. The lesson objective describes how the goal will be achieved. It is supported by the listed cognitive, psychomotor, and affective objectives that follow. The action verb used in the lesson goal determines, to a large extent, the instructional approach. A goal that uses verbs such as identify, describe, and discuss will most likely be pursued through a lecture or presentation format. A goal that identifies demonstrate as the desired outcome behavior will be addressed in a practical session. The same applies to the design of the assessment method. Lesson goals that are predominantly cognitive will be assessed through summative evaluations such as multiple choice and short answer tests. Psychomotor goals will be assessed by methods such as observation or a skills checklist. Affective domain goals can be assessed by the student's team member or team leader behaviors during the psychomotor practical evaluation. New subheading, lesson objectives. The lesson objectives portion of the lesson plan is a listing of student performance objectives that support the lesson goal. Objectives are categorized according to 3 domains of learning: cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. Depending on the lesson plan, format, or the institutional preference, objectives may be assigned a numeric sequencing. This allows the objective to be referenced on tests and other course materials. Similar to the lesson goal, lesson objectives should be reviewed with students so they know in greater detail what will be covered in the lesson. This is especially important for concrete and field-dependent learners. Teaching tip box. Students should be given a complete list of objectives for each lesson of a course. That way, they know what material will be covered. Objectives also make a good study guide. New subheading, recommended list of equipment and supplies. Classroom success for the instructor is most often ensured by careful preparation. This preparation process includes reviewing the material, refreshing knowledge and skills, preparing the learning environment, and preparing instructional materials. The lesson plan contains a list of equipment and supplies needed for the lesson plan to be taught effectively. This list may include such items as instructional models, audiovisual materials and equipment, handouts, student practice materials, and practical training equipment. Simulation-based instruction is equipment intensive, thus, this list can be quite extensive and complex. The supply list is also useful at the completion of the lesson as a checklist to ensure that materials are accounted for and returned to their proper storage locations. Teaching tip box. Instructors should not forget to prepare the basic, quote, tools of instruction, such as whiteboard markers, erasers, a laser pointer, and a podium. If any part of a lesson plan is going to fail, it most likely will be the part that is related to or dependent on equipment or technology. For this reason, the instructor should begin by becoming familiar with all material and aids to be used. Instructors should not assume that they know how something works. Instruction manuals are an excellent source of information and usually contain additional facts worth presenting to learners. Because of this, instructors should arrive well in advance of the class start time and should check and review all equipment. The instructors should not assume that because a particular audiovisual device or piece of equipment was in the classroom during the last session, it is still available. Also, instructors should know whom to contact if assistance is needed with technology. The complexity and cost of current educational technology preclude replacement or repair by the average instructor. The instructor must have a backup plan in the event of equipment failure or other such problems that can occur with technology-dependent lessons. The backup plan may involve alternative aids to accomplish the lesson, materials to be presented, or an entirely different lesson to replace the intended one. The effective instructor always has one or two lessons, quote, in the can, in the event that there is an unforeseen problem. Teaching tip box. If a planned lesson cannot be presented as intended and no backup lesson is available, the instructor can facilitate a variety of guided practice activities, such as case studies, or have students perform patient scenarios on related content. If a face-to-face session cannot occur, conference calls or sessions such as GoToMeeting could be used. At the beginning of a course, the instructor can review prerequisite skills and knowledge. An instructor should never waste a lesson by canceling class. Practice and review are always needed. One area of concern in EMS education is the quality and amount of equipment available for training. Too often, outdated or broken equipment is relegated to training, or the amount of equipment is insufficient for active student participation. This sends a negative message about the service and its appreciation of training to the learner. It also violates basic educational principles in that learners are not receiving the most realistic experience during the learning process. Behavioral modeling may have as great an impact on learning development as what students are taught by the instructor. Also, a lack of equipment identical to that used in the student's practice makes it necessary for the provider to train again before they can begin functioning in the field setting. If they participate in field calls as part of their training, providers may become confused and frustrated because the differences in equipment and procedures between the classroom and the field site. Because differences in equipment may be inevitable, the instructors should encourage students to let the clinical and field preceptors know they need orientation to a new piece of equipment, such as a different ECG monitor. The use of realistic simulators has become common in EMS education. Although a valuable teaching tool, the use of simulation requires specialized training on the part of the instructor as well as proper setup. Often, a detailed simulation or dedicated simulation lab with assigned staff is used, requiring the instructor to arrange lab time in advance to work with the lab staff to ensure the proper objectives and skills are covered. Again, pre-planning for instruction becomes a critical concern for the instructor, as does the backup plan in the event of equipment failure or other unforeseen problems. Teaching tip box. A lesson plan may be designed to, quote, teach a particular model or type of equipment. This is especially true of lesson plans provided by equipment manufacturers. The instructor must make sure that the teaching matches the equipment the students will be using for the in-field and for testing. Providing a variety of similar equipment, such as different types of traction splints, can ensure students are aware there are several types of tools to manage large bone fractures. Students must be encouraged to investigate what equipment is included on the ambulances where they will perform field experiences. If the instructor is teaching students who provide varied services, the instructor can ask students to provide an inventory of the equipment that is available to them. In this way, the instructor can determine whether students will be using different or unusual equipment in the field. If the instructor does not have a specific piece of equipment in their training cache, but students may benefit from instruction on it, they can make arrangements to borrow equipment from the service for a single class session.